The Summer Showdown is just around the corner, and today I want to talk about 5 players who I think could make the difference in this Summer Showdown that is full of breakouts and upsets, and we don't really know what's going to happen. Honestly, I was talking about in one of my other videos. This feels kind of like March Madness for college basketball, where there's a lot of unpredictable matches going on here. And for my honorable mentions, I want to start off with the Atlanta Reign and the Vancouver Titans. None of the players on here made my top 5 list, but they are obviously very interesting to figure out here because the Atlanta Reign DPS are supposed to be really great, and the rest of the team is solid, but we just haven't seen it this season at 6-6 before this Vancouver Titan match. And the Titans have actually really impressed with their new roster. I know a lot of people are really liking Shockwave, Dalton, and Shredlock specifically, and KSA really put up some solid Sigma numbers the past week, which is important because Sigmas are honestly like the playmaking off-tank at the moment that if you have one, you have a chance every week. And I want to talk about these guys. These guys are really big upset contenders. Watch out for them. But now let's move into our specific top 5 players that I think you need to watch out for this weekend. Number 5, I have Note from the Dallas Fuel. Obviously, he's the off-tank, he plays Diva and Sigma, and I think he can be really good some weeks. He's got a really good Sigma, but there's a bit of worry about how consistently he plays to a top tier. There's not so much that a worry that he throws, I don't think. I think he's really solid pretty most of the time, but it's just he's not always quite that like carry potential tank. And with the rest of the Fuel roster, the DPS duo is good, even with Onigod filling in, but that obviously Onigod isn't quite as good as Decay, I think people will admit. And so it's more important for that tank line to come in and make some plays because the support line I think is fine, but I really do think the support line relies on the Dallas Fuel's tank line to really set up the play a lot more than a lot of other support lines. Their support line is not great. It's not awful, but I really do think it comes down to this tank line performing well, and I think it'll come down to Note and how he performs on the Sigma this weekend, especially if some Genji play comes in. If Sigma's able to hit some good accretion rocks and stuns there, that could be really big for helping shut down any problems that may be caused by that, especially if they play a team like the Paris Eternal. Next up on the number 4, I want to talk about Alarm for a little bit. We talked about him a lot as being one of the best Baptiste players in the league, but last week we saw him on the Brigida almost entirely against the San Francisco Shock, which is a bit curious, and I think some of the discussion there will be about replacing Poco into the lineup. But I also think they need to consider how Alarm did on this Brigida. I don't think he's a bad Brigida necessarily, but I do think he has a lot more impact on the Baptiste, and that'll be interesting to see about who he plays and also how he plays whoever he ends up playing on. And so that's important because the Philadelphia Fusion are obviously one of the favorites for this tournament, even though they just got kind of destroyed by the Shock. They are obviously still a great team, and they're going to be looking to rebound. They're definitely going to be able to have this week between last week against the Shock and this upcoming week to prepare, and it'll give them enough time to really figure it out. And his support play could honestly be key in figuring out whether this Fusion roster can bounce back. Next up, number 3, we have Shax from the LA Valiant. And I believe it was Sideshow. He was doing a stream where he was discussing the breakdown of the match, where he talked about how this meta basically 100% nerfs the LA Valiant. And I couldn't agree more. Like, when Shax isn't able to carry on that Tracer, it's really not as big of an impact on the other heroes that he can play. And so if they can't figure out a way to manipulate Shax in this lineup well on the Tracer, then they might have to go with something else like the Torbjorn or whatever to shut down the Genji, because they kind of got decimated by the Genji last week, and they really need to figure that out. If you can't, and the Tracers have been really struggling to win duels lately against Genjis. If your star player can't do that, I don't think the rest of the Valiant's roster is good enough to carry this team to the finals of the Summer Showdown. They're still a solid team, but I think it really comes down to how much Shax can carry this team. And if they can't play Tracer, what are they going to play? And are they going to play it to such an elite level that they would their normal carry potential Tracer composition? And so yeah, keep an eye on that. I think it could be interesting to watch. And then Michelle for the Seoul Dynasty. I'm super excited about this one. I really like him. He's one of my favorite players of the past few seasons, and I'm excited to see him back in this lineup for Seoul. And the Seoul have a very winnable game. So the Seoul Dynasty have a very winnable game against the London Spitfire. I do think the London Spitfire could eke it out, but you have players like Prophet on the roster, and especially if Michelle's coming back in here and filling that hole really well, I thought last week. If he can, it's only 1 week, so we have history of him in the league, but not recency, which is a little bit concerning, I guess. But I'm gonna go off the idea that one performance was a solid showing of what we can expect from him, and say he could be a pretty solid fill-in tank here, or not fill-in tank. Hopefully, I think he should be their starting off tank for the rest of the season, honestly. But if he's able to come in and perform well, they could take down the Spitfire in what I think is going to be a really close matchup. And his playmaking could be the difference maker in this matchup to make them to get them into the next round. And my number one player to watch, I have Carpe. And now this is for several reasons. One, just for pure entertainment. We all know how great this guy can be. But specifically, he got kind of destroyed last week, especially early on in the match against the Shock. And the Shock, or the Fusion, already have enough problems with doubts about their tank line. What's going on with their support line? Are they playing Alarm at Baptiste, or what's going on here? Or Brigida? And so Carpe has always been their stabilizer. Everyone always knows he can show up. And Jesus put up pretty good numbers. But the fact is, they need Carpe to show up. And last week, I don't know if he didn't show up necessarily, but he just got shut down. The Shock are obviously the best team in NA, and everyone's going to be looking to take them down. And it'll come down to Carpe being able to show up and even contest the Shock if they make it to the finals. So I think that's really interesting because the Fusion have so many questions, yet they have such a great record. And it's going to really be important for Carpe to come in and show up on that Tracer and not kind of get lost in the field of play. We've seen a lot of struggles lately because the Torbjorn turrets can really control so many line of sights that the teams really struggle to take control of lines of sight as Tracer. And I believe it was a 47% win rate, 53% win rate, something around there. Either way, that it wasn't in Tracer's favor for Tracer versus Torbjorn. On the Overwatch League website, they had an article on it. And that's important because if you're struggling against the Torbjorn, that's going to be difficult when you play against some of the teams like the Atlanta Reign who can play the Torbjorn. And if you're also struggling against the Genjis, like the Sparkles of the league, that can honestly dual Traces pretty well now. And if you're going against teams like the Shock, where the Widowmaker literally just headshots you every time you go for a flank, what are you going to do? And so it's going to be really important for the Fusion to work out some of those team compositions this week, even if they keep the same team composition, but how they just play it, because it's going to be difficult. This is a wild tournament, and there are a lot of different teams that could really challenge some of these elite teams like the Fusion. But as it comes down to it, we all think the Shock are probably going to win it, but I'm not 100% sure that we should just skip over it yet. It's always a tournament for a reason, you know, they got to prove they can do it. So I'm super excited to watch. I think we'll have a ton of upsets in both regions. It'll be super awesome. Even if there aren't the upsets in the end, I think a lot of close, entertaining games. And I honestly can't wait to break down some of the games after this weekend. So everybody, thank you so much for watching. I've been Emret, and I'll see you next time.